Today on JiK Labs, we're going to use Microsoft Excel and show you the simple process to make some charts out of the data you have. Let's get started. Now that you have Excel open and ready to go, you're going to notice we're at our JiK Labs sales summaries by salesperson, and we want to graphically represent this data. So it is pretty easy to do. So we can come in here, we want to highlight salesperson and sales totals and highlight all of them. And then we're going to go up to the top, and on the insert on the ribbon, we're going to click on, right, for simplicity, we're going to click on this bar set right here. We're going to select a cluster column, just hit it, and we are done. That is pretty much as easy as it gets. But we're not done there yet. We have the layout. We have Alice, Jack, Robert, and Sophia's sales, total sales, year-to-date sales. Well, this just says sales total. What is this? So we want to rename the title of this chart, and we can do so by double-clicking on it and call it 2021 year-to-date sales. But what about this column on the y-axis and the x-axis with the salespeople? What do they represent? Well, we know by the title of this chart that it is year-to-date sales, but if we wanted to add in some additional information, keep in mind we're using Microsoft 365. So on the right-hand side of the chart in the top right, you have an ability to choose chart elements, change the chart style, as well as chart filters. So right now we want to add in some chart elements. We want to add in the axis titles, as well as there are a couple other things you can select are data labels, which will show you the exact totals, because as you see sometimes, well, it's the line right here is 40,000, but it's just short of 40,000. What is that total? When you go to print that out, you won't know. But if you add in the data labels, you'll be able to see that exact total. Now, also another option you could choose is the data table, which would kind of just give you a cutout of Excel down below in doing those. You don't need both. So right now we're just going to leave the labels in place, and then we can have the legend as well. Now in the axis titles, just like in the title of the graph, we can say double click on it, highlight it, and rename them. And over here we're going to say sales dollars. And there's your chart. Now, if you were to come in here and you wanted to, let's just say, we only want to see Alice and Robert's sales, you can hit the chart filters, and it's going to bring up a little pop-up window for you. And we can say unselect all, and we want to see Alice and Robert, and hit apply. And the chart will update and only show us those sales. But of course, we want to see everybody. So we're going to go ahead and add everyone back in. And now we're back to square one of where we were. Now another thing we can do is change the chart type from this top right hand options. We're going to change the chart style. There are a bunch of preset settings that we can utilize for this chart type. So we're just changing the style. Let's go with this blue one for now. And then you can also come in and change the colors. If we didn't want it blue, we can make things, whatever colors we wanted to make them. But for now, we're going to leave it at the blue. Well, let's just say you don't want to see bars. Well, how do we do that? Well, at the top ribbon of on insert, you can have the chart design. We can, up here on the top right of that bar, we can change the chart type. So we're going to click on that. It will bring up a new window. Now we're looking at this new pop-up window for change chart type. So in here you can have columns, lines, pie, bar, area, so on and so forth. But we just want to use a pie chart. And right now you can have multiple different pies, and they also have on the tab on the left recommended pies that Microsoft thinks will be best given the data that you've highlighted. So right there would be a pie chart that we're looking at, but we'll go back to all charts, the tab on the right, and we're going to select pie. We don't want a three-dimensional pie. We just want, your standard run-of-the-mill pie chart. It'll pop up in the screen. If you hover over it, it'll make it a little bit larger for you, or you can just click OK, and your chart will update automatically for you. Now you can see it's carried over our title as well as all of this information. We could potentially come back in our elements, and we have our chart title, data labels, and legends, which makes this a lot easier to read. It is a matter of personal preference of which chart that you are looking for. Let's go back real quick to the column chart, because we want to add in the invoice count as well. There are two ways we could do this. One is just delete this chart and start over, and then highlight everything over here and say we want to make a chart. Or we could come in here, select the chart, come back up to the ribbon, and we want to select data. Select data is going to bring up a new window, and it's going to give us some choices. This is the data that we already have selected, and these are the rows and columns. But what we want to do is add some data. So we're going to click add, and the series name, we're going to highlight D11 for invoice count, as that is what this series of data is called. And then we're going to select the values, and that's going to be D12 to D15. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Now we can see we have sales totals and invoice count, and they're going to be shown on our graph. If you didn't want them, on our chart. If you didn't want them shown, you could uncheck them, but since we want them both shown, we have both the check marks as well as the data over here. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. And we're going to say, whoa, what the heck? Where's our invoice count? Well, look at the scale on the left-hand side. Well, it's the first line is 50,000 and 0 is down here. Our invoice counts are at max 24. Well, that's not going to work very well in this. So once again, we need to come up to change our chart type and bring up that new window and look at our change the chart type. So we could do column. It's not going to work very well, but what we want to do is in all charts, come down to the very bottom and select combo. And now we can see we have a couple of different choices. Right now we have a column chart with lines. But if we look at this, it's very difficult to see on this screen, but we can see that the invoice count is pretty much sitting down around 0. So this chart and this extra data is going to do us no good whatsoever because it's sitting at 0, given that our sales dollars are significantly larger. But if you look down here at the bottom center of the chart type window, we can see our data. And right now it's a column for sales and it's a line for invoice count. We could come in here and say it's a column or whatever, but in this case we're going to leave it as a line. And right here, this is the most important thing. We can add a secondary axis for invoice count. Given that our ranges of data are so vast and so different, that 45,000 versus 24, that's going to be very hard to visualize. So if we check secondary axis, now we can see on the right hand side we've added a secondary axis for the invoice count, which ranges from 0 to 30 versus 0 to 45,000 in sales. And then we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And now we can see it's added in the invoice count, and we have the right hand side, the y-axis of counting by 5s going to 30, and our sales are on the left hand side. But we want to add in some more chart elements. Now we've added in, since we've unchecked and rechecked data labels, it is now including both the sales and invoice counts. It's not 100% pretty, but it's still there. So if we added in the data table, we could do that as well, and let's just get rid of the data labels, and now we can see very specifically how everything is going about. Now let's just say, since these are invoice counts and not really a progression of lines, we want to just see a dot. So once again, we can highlight this, go to change chart type, and for our combination, we want to change invoice count to a scatter plot. And just hit OK. Because it's not really a progression. It looks pretty, but it's actually really just a single point of invoice counts for each salesperson. So once again, it resets some of our data. So if we come back in the top right on our chart elements, and we can add in the data labels like so, or we could do the data table again. So very quickly, if you come in here and click on some of your data, you can change the color, the fill color, so let's just say we want to make these guys yellow. and we want to make the columns, right click, you right click on that and it's going to say fill. We're going to change the fill color to orange. So now it's updated our legend as well as the data on this. Likely so, if you came in on any of your axes and right clicked, you can format that axis. And that's going to bring up on the right hand side, which I think my head is covering, so we're going to move me back. And then you can set, right here, we're looking at the secondary axis. Well, we could say we want to set that to 50, and we want to be a minimal of 10. And as we're changing these, we can see that these dots now are a lot lower because we set the range up to 50. So if we went back to, let's call it 30, we would have a much larger range because we're no longer starting at 0 but starting at 10. You can always just click the reset button and Excel will have it set up as auto for you. Same thing if we came over here and clicked on this axis. Now we can see these totals as a max of 45,000, but let's just say we did 100,000 and hit tab. We're going to see the bars get a lot shorter because the range is so much greater. So once again, you can click reset, and Excel does a pretty good job of just automatically setting them for you. You can also change the number formatting. Let's just say since this is, we don't want any decimal places, that just to make it look a little bit prettier. To keep the chart looking clean, you can play with the formatting and make it look however you like. That's the great thing about Microsoft Excel. Possibilities are almost limitless for how you want to design and how you want to make and represent your data. Well, that about sums up our very quick, well, not so quick, intro into charts with Microsoft Excel. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that little bell so you always know what's going on. Thanks for watching. You may recognize this summary page of our total salesperson's totals. Keep in mind we're using Office